The Ottoman Empire began as a small principality in northwestern Anatolia at the end of the 13th century. Its founder, Osman I, from whom the empire takes its name, was a tribal leader from the Oghuz Turks, who migrated into Anatolia after the Mongol invasions disrupted Central Asia. What started as a minor frontier state soon transformed into one of the most powerful empires in the world. But its humble origins are crucial to understand how it rose. At the time of Osman's rise, Anatolia was divided into many Turkish principalities, called Beyliks. The Byzantine Empire still controlled parts of the region, but was weak in losing territory. Osman's principality was strategically located near Byzantine lands, giving him opportunities for expansion. Unlike other beyliks, which were often caught up in rivalries, Osman's forces concentrated on pushing westward into Byzantine territory. The Ottomans used Ghazi warriors, fighters motivated by both religion and the promise of wealth. These warriors were key to the empire's success. They raided Byzantine borderlands, seizing castles, towns, and villages. Over time, Osman and his followers established a reputation for being both fierce in battle and skilled in governance. Osman's son, Orhan 1323–1362 expanded on his father's foundation. He captured Bursa in 1326, which became the Ottomans' first major capital. Bursa was not just a military prize, but also an economic and cultural center. Orhan introduced coinage, built mosques, and organized the state's early institutions. With this, the Ottomans began to shift from being a tribal confederation to a structured state. One of the most important factors behind Ottoman success was their ability to absorb and adapt. They welcomed skilled administrators, soldiers, and artisans from conquered lands, regardless of religion or ethnicity. This inclusiveness made them stronger and more flexible compared to rivals who excluded non-Muslims. The Ottomans also developed a unique system of military and social organization. By the mid-14th century, they had created the an elite infantry force recruited through the Devshirme system, in which Christian boys from the Balkans were taken, converted to Islam, and trained as soldiers or administrators. This gave the Ottomans a loyal and disciplined army directly tied to the Sultan. Another strength was their strategic location. Situated at the crossroads of Asia and Europe, they had access to trade routes and could expand in multiple directions. As they conquered new territories in the Balkans and Anatolia, they established a base that allowed them to grow steadily. By the time Osman's grandson, Murad I (1362–1389), came to power, the Ottomans were no longer just a small state. They had expanded deep into Europe, defeating Balkan kingdoms and incorporating diverse populations into their empire. Murad also established the tradition of the Sultan as both a political and military leader, centralizing authority under his command. The foundation of the Ottoman Empire, therefore, was not just about military conquests. It was about building a system that combined flexibility, inclusiveness, and organization. The Ottomans were able to take advantage of the weaknesses of their neighbors, while also building a society that attracted loyalty from conquered peoples. By the late 14th century, the empire was poised for even greater expansion. It had grown from a small frontier principality under Osman I into a formidable power that challenged both Christian Europe and rival Muslim states. This early foundation set the stage for the empire's spectacular rise in the centuries that followed. The capture of Constantinople in 1453 stands as one of the most significant turning points in world history. For centuries, Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, a Christian stronghold and the gateway between Europe and Asia. When the Ottomans under Sultan Mehmed II, later known as Mehmed the Conqueror, took the city, it not only ended a thousand-year history of Byzantium but also marked the beginning of a new era with Istanbul. As the heart of the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine Empire by the 15th century was a shadow of its former self. Once commanding vast territories, it had been reduced to little more than the city of Constantinople and a few scattered lands. Surrounded by Ottoman territories, the Byzantines relied on fortifications and foreign aid to survive. But Constantinople's walls, though mighty, were no longer enough to withstand the growing power of the Ottomans. Mehmed II, ascending the throne at the age of 19, had an ambitious vision. He wanted to make Constantinople the capital of a world empire. Unlike earlier sultans who attempted but failed to conquer the city, Mehmed was determined to succeed. He prepared meticulously, both militarily and strategically. One of his greatest innovations was the use of massive cannons, designed by a Hungarian engineer named Orban. These cannons, some of which could fire stone balls weighing hundreds of pounds, were capable of battering even the strongest walls of Constantinople. Alongside artillery, Mehmed assembled a massive army of around 80,000 to 100,000 men, including the elite Janissaries. The siege began on April 6, 1453. For nearly 2 months, the Ottomans surrounded the city by land and sea. The Byzantines, led by Emperor Constantine XI, mounted a heroic defense despite being vastly outnumbered. The city's legendary Theodosian walls held firm under repeated assaults, but the Ottomans' cannons slowly weakened them. One of Mehmed's most brilliant tactics was transporting ships over land. The Byzantines had blocked the Golden Horn with a massive chain, preventing Ottoman ships from entering. In response, Mehmed ordered ships to be rolled over wooden logs, greased with oil, bypassing the blockade. When Ottoman ships appeared inside the Golden Horn, Byzantine defenders were shocked and demoralized. On May 29, 1453, the final assault began. The Ottomans launched wave after wave of attacks, and eventually, the Janissaries broke through a section of the walls. Emperor Constantine XI is said to have fought to the end, dying in battle as his city fell. By afternoon, Constantinople was in Ottoman hands. The fall of the city had enormous consequences. For Europe, it was a catastrophe. The last remnant of the Roman Empire was gone, and the Ottomans now controlled one of the most strategic cities in the world. For the Ottomans, it was a triumph that transformed their image from a regional power to an empire of global importance. Mehmed II immediately began rebuilding and transforming Constantinople into Istanbul, the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. He encouraged people of all backgrounds, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, to settle there, reviving the city's population. He converted the Hagia Sophia, the greatest church of Byzantium, into a mosque, while also commissioning new mosques, markets, schools, and baths. Istanbul became a vibrant, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious city. Reflecting the empire itself, strategically, the conquest gave the Ottomans complete control over the Bosporus Strait, allowing them to dominate trade routes between Asia and Europe. This increased their wealth and influence, but it also indirectly pushed Europeans to seek alternative trade routes, leading to the age of exploration. Thus, the fall of Constantinople reshaped global history, setting the stage for both Ottoman supremacy and European expansion overseas. The symbolic value was equally important. Mehmed proclaimed himself Caesar of Rome, claiming to be the heir of the Roman emperors. By taking the city that had been the capital of Eastern Rome, he positioned the Ottoman Empire not only as a Muslim power, but as a universal empire. In the centuries that followed, Istanbul grew into one of the greatest cities of the world. Its skyline filled with domes and minarets, its markets bustled with goods from 3 continents, and its palaces symbolized imperial grandeur. The city's capture was more than a military victory. It was the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's golden age. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was therefore more than just the end of Byzantium. It marked the dawn of a new power that would dominate for centuries. In the rise of Istanbul as one of the most important cities in history, the Ottoman Empire reached the height of its power, wealth, and influence during the reign of Suleiman I (1520 to 1566), famously known as Suleiman the Magnificent in the West and Kanuni, Suleiman, the lawgiver in the Islamic world. His reign marked the golden age of the empire. When Ottoman armies stretched deep into Europe, its fleets ruled the seas, and its culture and laws left a lasting imprint on history. When Suleiman ascended the throne in 1520, the empire was already powerful, but he expanded its reach further than any of his predecessors. He was a skilled military commander, leading campaigns across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Under his leadership, the Ottoman Empire became a true global superpower. Military expansion. One of Suleiman's earliest triumphs was the capture of Belgrade in 1521, giving the Ottomans a strong base in Central Europe. The following year, in 1522, his forces took Rhodes from the Knights Hospital, securing Ottoman dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. In 1526, Suleiman dealt a devastating blow to Hungary at the Battle of Mohács. The Hungarian army was crushed, and much of Hungary came under Ottoman rule. This opened the door to further expansion into Europe. By 1529, Suleiman's armies laid siege to Vienna, the heart of the Habsburg Empire. Although the siege failed, it demonstrated that the Ottomans were a major threat to Central Europe. Suleiman also expanded eastward, waging war against the Safavid Empire of Persia. These campaigns secured Ottoman dominance in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, and solidified control over key Islamic holy cities such as Mecca and Medina. In North Africa, the Ottomans established dominance over coastal territories, challenging European powers like Spain. At sea, the Ottoman navy under admirals such as Barbarossa Hayreddin Pasha became the most powerful force in the Mediterranean. The empire's ships not only protected trade but also fought European fleets, ensuring Ottoman influence across the seas. Legal and administrative reforms. Suleiman's greatness was not only in war but also in governance. Known as the lawgiver, he reformed the empire's legal system, blending Islamic Sharia law with traditional Ottoman laws. These reforms provided consistency and fairness in administration, reducing corruption and ensuring justice. His laws covered everything from land ownership and taxation to criminal justice, leaving a system that endured for centuries. The millet system, which allowed religious minorities to govern their own communities under Ottoman oversight, was strengthened during his reign. This helped maintain peace in a diverse empire where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived side by side. Cultural flourishing. Suleiman's reign was also a golden age of culture, art, and architecture. He was a patron of poets, scholars, and artists, and his court became a center of learning and creativity. The empire produced beautiful manuscripts, textiles, and ceramics, reflecting a blend of Islamic, Persian, and Byzantine influences. The most visible legacy of this era is in architecture. Suleiman's chief architect, Mimar Sinan, designed some of the most magnificent structures in Ottoman history, including the Suleimani Mosque in Istanbul. These buildings symbolized the empire's power and served as centers of religion, education, and community life. Wealth and trade under the Ottoman Empire controlled key trade routes connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa. Goods, such as silk, spices, and precious metals flowed through Ottoman lands. This made the empire extremely wealthy, funding its armies and monumental projects. Istanbul became one of the richest and most cosmopolitan cities in the world. Her personal life and influence. Suleiman was not only a statesman and warrior, but also a poet and intellectual. His personal life also influenced the empire's politics. His wife, Harem Sultan Roxolana, broke traditions by becoming deeply involved in state affairs. This marked the beginning of a period often called the Sultanate of Women, where imperial women gained significant influence in politics. Legacy. By the time of Suleiman's death in 1566, the Ottoman Empire was at its peak. It stretched from the gates of Vienna in the west to the Persian Gulf in the east, and from North Africa to the Arabian Peninsula. Its institutions were strong, its culture vibrant, and its military feared. Suleiman left behind an empire that was not only vast, but also deeply influential in shaping global history. His reign symbolized the height of Ottoman greatness, a period when the empire was respected and feared worldwide. The Ottoman Empire, after centuries of expansion and glory, began to experience decline from the late 16th century onwards. This decline was not immediate or simple. It was a long and complex process marked by internal weaknesses, external pressures, and gradual loss of control over vast territories. Understanding these internal struggles is key to explaining how an empire that once threatened Europe's heart eventually came to be known as the sick man of Europe. Signs of weakness. After reign of Suleiman the Magnificent 1522-1566 marked the empire's golden age. But after his death, cracks started to appear. His successors lacked the same vision and leadership. Many sultans became more focused on palace life than governance, leading to weak and indecisive rule. One major problem was the system of succession. Ottoman princes often fought brutal civil wars for the throne. But to prevent this, later sultans confined potential heirs in the palace, a practice called the Kaif's cage system. Princes grew up isolated, unprepared to rule, and easily influenced by advisors or court factions. This weakened central leadership. Military stagnation. The Ottoman military, once the most advanced in the world, began to stagnate. The Janissaries, the elite infantry corps, had been key to the empire's rise. But over time, they became corrupt and resistant to reform. Instead of focusing on military training, many Janissaries turned to business and politics, using their influence to block modernization. By the 17th century, they were more of a burden than an asset. Ottoman armies also fell behind in technology compared to European rivals. While Europe advanced with firearms, artillery, and naval power, the Ottomans struggled to keep pace. Defeats such as the Battle of Lepanto, 1571, where the Ottoman navy suffered a major loss against a Christian alliance, signaled that the empire was no longer unbeatable. Economic troubles. Economically, the empire faced serious challenges. The Ottomans had long profited from controlling land trade routes between East and West, but with the age of exploration, European powers like Portugal, Spain, and later the Dutch and British, discovered new sea routes to Asia. This bypassed Ottoman-controlled routes, reducing trade revenue. Inflation also hurt the empire. The influx of silver from the Americas into Europe disrupted global economies, and the Ottomans struggled to adapt. Corruption and mismanagement of taxes further weakened the financial system. As a result, the empire's treasury, once overflowing, began to run dry. Internal revolts and regional autonomy. The vast size of the empire meant ruling diverse populations was always a challenge. As central authority weakened, many regions sought greater autonomy. Local governors, known as pashas, often acted independently, collecting taxes for themselves instead of sending them to Istanbul. Peasant revolts, known as the Salali rebellions in Anatolia during the 16th and 17th centuries, further destabilized the empire. These uprisings were fueled by heavy taxation, corruption, and economic hardship. In the Balkans and other provinces, nationalist sentiment slowly grew, planting seeds for future independence movements. Palace intrigue and corruption. The Ottoman court, once a place of strong central authority, became plagued by intrigue. Powerful advisors, eunuchs, and members of the royal harem often controlled weak sultans. The Sultanate of Women, while it showed the influence of imperial women like Harem Sultan, also contributed to factional rivalries. Corruption became widespread, with government posts often sold rather than earned. This undermined efficiency and loyalty within the bureaucracy. Instead of serving the empire, Many officials sought personal enrichment. European rivals externally. The rise of strong European states posed constant threats. The Habsburgs in Austria, the Russians expanding southward, and Western European naval powers all challenged Ottoman dominance. The failed siege of Vienna in 1683 marked a turning point. European coalitions began pushing the Ottomans back. The Treaty of Karlowitz, 1699, forced the empire to cede large territories in Europe, ending its era of expansion. Attempts at reform. Despite these challenges, not all was decline. Some sultans and statesmen recognized the need for reform. Leaders such as Kprl Mehmed Pasha in the 17th century restored some order through strong administration. Later, in the 18th and 19th centuries, efforts like the Tanzimat reforms sought to modernize the army, bureaucracy, and legal system. However, resistance from conservative groups, especially the Janissaries, often undermined these reforms. The long decline. By the 18th century, the Ottoman Empire was no longer a global superpower but a weakened state struggling to maintain control. Internal divisions, economic decline, and military defeats eroded its strength. While the empire still had cultural and political influence, it was increasingly dependent on European powers. The decline and internal struggles of the Ottoman Empire were not a single event but a gradual process spanning centuries. These weaknesses, corruption, outdated military practices, economic troubles, and weak leadership would eventually set the stage for the empire's collapse in the 20th century. The Ottoman Empire, once a mighty force stretching across 3 continents, faced its ultimate downfall in the early 20th century. After centuries of gradual decline, the final blow came during and after World War I, 1914 to 1918, which reshaped the map of the Middle East and brought the 600-year-old empire to an end. The empire on the eve of warby, the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Ottoman Empire was already described as the sick man of Europe. Decades of territorial losses, nationalist revolts, and European interference had weakened its position. Provinces like Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Romania had broken away, while powers like Britain, France, and Russia exploited the empire's instability to expand their influence. The empire still controlled Anatolia, parts of the Middle East, and some Balkan lands, but its territory was shrinking rapidly. Internally, reform movements like the Tanzimat 1839 to 1876 and the later Young Turk Revolution 1908 attempted to modernize the empire. But these reforms were not enough to stop its decline. The Young Turks, an entry into World War I in 19... The Young Turks, a reformist movement, seized power and sought to strengthen the empire through modernization and nationalism. However, their policies alienated many ethnic minorities, fueling further nationalist movements among Arabs, Armenians, and others. When World War I broke out in 1914, the Ottoman leadership faced a critical choice: remain neutral or join one of the alliances. Hoping to regain lost lands and secure survival, the Ottomans allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Central Powers. This decision would prove disastrous. The war fronts. The Ottoman Empire fought on multiple fronts during the war. Gallipoli 1915-1916. The Ottomans, under Commander Mustafa Kemal, later Atatürk, successfully defended the Dardanelles against a British and French invasion. This victory boosted Ottoman morale and made Mustafa Kemal a national hero. Middle Eastern fronts. The British launched campaigns in Mesopotamia, Iraq, and Palestine, gradually defeating Ottoman forces. Arab tribes, inspired by promises of independence, revolted against Ottoman rule in the Arab Revolt, 1916. Supported by Britain's T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. Caucasus Front. The Ottomans clashed with Russia in eastern Anatolia, suffering heavy losses. While the Ottomans had some successes, they lacked the industrial and financial strength of their enemies. The empire was stretched thin, and its population suffered from famine, disease, and shortages. The Armenian tragedy. One of the darkest chapters of Ottoman history occurred during World War I. The Armenian Genocide 1915 to 1917, fearing that the Armenian population might support Russia. Ottoman leaders deported and massacred hundreds of thousands of Armenians. This remains a deeply painful and controversial issue in history, with lasting political consequences. The defeat of the empire. By 1918, the Central Powers were collapsing. Germany and Austria-Hungary surrendered, and the Ottomans followed shortly after. On October 30, 1918, they signed the Armistice of Montreux, ending their involvement in the war. The consequences were devastating. Allied forces occupied much of the empire, including Istanbul. Territories were divided up under secret agreements like the Sykes-Picot Agreement, 1916, which carved the Middle East into zones of British and French influence. Former Ottoman lands like Palestine, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon came under European control. The Turkish War of Independence. The empire was in ruins, but a new chapter was about to begin. The Allies planned to partition Anatolia itself, giving lands to Greece, Italy, and Armenia. However, resistance emerged under Mustafa Kemal, who led the Turkish War of Independence 1919 to 1923. Through determined military campaigns and political negotiation, Atatürk and his supporters expelled occupying forces and established control over Anatolia. In 1922, the Sultanate was officially abolished, marking the end of Ottoman rule. The birth of modern Turkey in 1923. The Republic of Turkey was proclaimed with Atatürk as its first president. This new nation was founded on principles of secularism, nationalism, and modernization, sharply breaking from the Ottoman past. Legacy of collapse. The fall of the Ottoman Empire had enormous consequences. The Middle East was reshaped, with new states created under European mandates. Nationalist movements among Arabs, Kurds, Armenians, and others gained momentum, leaving conflicts that continue to influence the region today. For centuries, the Ottomans had been a bridge between East and West, a hub of trade and culture, and a dominant power in world affairs. Its collapse signaled the end of an era and the beginning of a new, uncertain age for the Middle East, but the final collapse after World War I was thus not just the end of an empire, but the birth of a new order, one that continues to shape global politics to this day.